Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Moscow today condemned Israel's strikes on Syria, calling them a gross violation of the country's sovereignty and international law. Russia's foreign ministry issued a statement saying the attacks deserve strong condemnation and called for respect of Syria's territorial integrity. A new US assessment has found that American strikes in June destroyed just 1 out of 3 targeted Iranian nuclear sites, NBC News has reported. Furthermore, President Trump reportedly rejected a broader military plan that would have involved weeks of strikes on Iran's nuclear program. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has called reported Israeli raids on a church in Gaza as unacceptable. The attack on Gaza's sole Catholic Church has reportedly killed 2 and left several injured, according to doctors at the Al-Ali hospital in Gaza City. Russia has reportedly handed over the bodies of 1,000 dead soldiers back to Kyiv, according to negotiators. It comes amid continued calls for peace in a war that has seen intensified strikes reported by both sides. Meanwhile, lawmakers in Ukraine have confirmed Yulia Savchenko as the new prime minister, confirming a reshuffle of Ukrainian politics announced by Volodymyr Zelensky. The Indian Pilot Federation are among the bodies to condemn a report by the Wall Street Journal that points towards the captain's actions. Investigations into the deadly AI-717 crash that killed 275 people are still ongoing. Now, at least 69 people have died after a devastating blaze inside a shopping mall in eastern Iraq. The fire engulfed a 5-story building in Kut City, with an investigation underway as a 3-day period of mourning is announced. Military drills are continuing in Taiwan, with Taipei coming to a standstill as Chinese invasion protocols are tested. Tensions have intensified between the self-governed Taiwan and China, who have spoken consistently about reunification. Now, for our first story, we start in the Middle East, where Israel carried out a series of powerful strikes on the Syrian capital, Damascus, escalating a campaign it says is in support of the country's Druze population, an Arab minority group involved in deadly clashes with Syrian government forces, according to reports from the area. The strikes, which Syria said killed at least 3 people in its capital, sent US officials scrambling to prevent a larger clash between the neighbouring countries, with Syria agreeing to withdraw its troops from the southern city of Sawaida and a new ceasefire deal with Druze militia in the area. Earlier today, in a televised address to the nation, Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara said the nation was faced with 2 options: either an open war with Israel at the cost of our Druze citizens, or allowing Druze clerics to return to reason and prioritise the national interest. Now, following the massive strikes, Russia has condemned Israel's attack. The Foreign Ministry has said that Israel's airstrikes on Syria are a violation of the country's sovereignty and on international law. The Foreign Ministry has further confirmed that the path to solving the problem lies through dialogue and strengthening national unity. We're now joined by our guest, Mark Sutherland, who's a geopolitical commentator. He joins us live from London. Mark, thank you very much for joining us once again on the programme. These compelling strikes, yesterday we saw visuals coming in from a news report, actually, on 2 occasions of it in the background. Compelling stuff. Could you give us a bit of background on why these altercations started and the possibilities of further escalation here, Mark?
Joshua, good to be with you again. What we have to just remember is that there are 180,000 Druze that are citizens of Israel. They serve in the IDF, and some of the ranks that they hold go way up within that military system. There's also, as you've just clearly stated, Druze that are the community that then live within Syria. We have recently seen the overthrow of Syria. We then have Giuliani, who has terrorist links, is a terrorist, it's ISIS, and then he puts on a suit, and we have that situation. Then there was recently appalling atrocities against the Alawite community in Syria. They have then turned against the Druze community within Syria, and I would say to you, most probably emboldened by the fact that the American administration has talked about or got rid of the sanctions that America holds against Syria. So put it in that background. So then we are then seeing jihadist terrorist factions then coming down to the town of Swede, where mainly the Druze live within that region, and of course within an ideology that where you have another group of people that do not follow your ideology of jihadism, then they are fair game, and then they are seen as infidels. Hence the attack, because Israel has Israeli citizens are Druze. After warning, then I think there were drone attacks, but then the fighters have gone in and dropped armaments as a warning in their eyes to say you need to back off, because these are members of there is a joint community here. So Joshua, that then, in my opinion, is the background to what is happening. And the thing we have to remember also of recently of what has happened within the change of Syria and the history and the players and what those players have previously been up to.
Mark, as I said previously, the images that we saw coming out of these strikes, huge infrastructure damage, mainly to the Ministry of Defense in the Syrian capital of Damascus. How do you assess Israel's underlying strategic rationale for targeting Damascus in the way that it did in support of the Druze population?
I think the issue is this, as I said, that on their border they have had there's been a complete regime change. And it's now in a position where you have to then settle that. Which way does Giuliani want to go? Does he then want to have a jihadist insurrection fight against Israel? Or is this way where Israel has taken this action, securing their border, being on the other side of the Golan Heights, to then say, well, we want a demilitarized buffer zone, plus we want to protect the Druze community there. That is all part of this. It's all then escalated up. Because remember, if you've got jihadist movements that go down to the south of Syria, it's then the targets that they are then able to reach within Israel. And Israel will not put up with this whatsoever, because as we see what's been happening in Gaza and Hamas, which we had a comment on earlier on the segment there. So this is why, Joshua, they are then looking at their borders. We also have to remember how much Turkey has played in regard to supporting the change of the regime. Israel is mindful of all of this. They are in the Middle East. They are the Middle East experts. It's their country. They have been following all of these issues for many, many years.
Mark, do you think, I just want to reiterate that the international community, apart from the United States, does view the Golan Heights territory as occupied by Israel. However, do you think that Israel, given the context around the Gaza war, given the fact Syria's new stance in the international community, we've seen the likes of Macron, we've obviously seen Donald Trump meet the new Syrian leader, lift sanctions on the country. Do you think in the way that Israel responds to this, do you think it risks alienating itself further from its Western allies, which have shown some which there has been some tension there? What are your thoughts on that?
Joshua, you raise a very good point, because they are walking a very difficult line. The other thing that they don't want to then do is provoke Erdogan within Turkey. And the other thing is, historically, turning around and going, let's reenact the Ottoman Empire. This is not easy at all. And if I remember my history previously, Syria had been under Ottoman control for 400 years. Whether people think all of this history is relevant over here, it is very relevant within a Middle East setting. They are walking a very difficult line, but also when they are fighting this war on so many different fronts, they have actually decided to say, look, the Golan Heights, in regard to their security, when they got those in 1973, that is extremely important. If they gave up that position, then from the Golan Heights, you can very easily fire into Israel. So they are not prepared to give that up. But because of the actions of other people by the border, they're taking defensive action, Josh.
Mark, what we have just covered is Russia's response to this situation. Russia is a country that has huge interests in the region, specifically in Syria. How significant is this Russian condemnation of Israel's actions in terms of Moscow's own influence over Damascus and its military presence, which is large in Syria?
Well, of course, it's to them. It's important. We also know the amount of interaction that they had with the Assad regime, etc. in the past, in very recent years, very recent future of a few months ago. Yes, it has to be listened to. But the key is this, Joshua, as well. We have got to be so aware of how many the way people decide to fight the proxy wars, etc. The last thing we want to see is war on any side and the casualties of that. But we also have to hold people responsible. If you are the only Jewish nation in the world and you're surrounded people that basically their ideology is to completely exterminate you, then you are going to react. You have no option but to defend yourself. And if we think about how would we feel if in our own individual nations, if we were put in that particular position.
Mark Sutherland, thank you very much for joining us and for your insight. Pleasure having you on the programme. We now move over to North America for our next story, where Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has announced that she held talks with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney to reinforce trade cooperation between their countries. Sheinbaum said both leaders agreed on the need to uphold the US-Mexico-Canada agreement, and they exchanged views on the tariff letters received from Trump. Here's what the Mexican president had to say.
Estamos de acuerdo en que es indispensable que se respete el tratado comercial, el TEMEC, y compartimos pues algunas experiencias sobre la carta que recibimos por parte del presidente Trump. Ellos recibieron una carta con 35% de aranceles, nosotros con 30%. Y pues las estrategias que estamos siguiendo. Ellos tienen también una mesa con las secretarías del gobierno de Estados Unidos, igual que nosotros. Uno de los temas que les planteé es por qué no ponemos en blanco y negro pues las inversiones que tienen ya planeadas en Estados Unidos para que puedan ser parte pues de esta mesa de trabajo que tenemos.
We're now joined by Andrew Latham, who's a professor of International Relations. He joins us live from Minnesota. Thank you very much, Andrew, for joining us on the programme. Andrew, how significant is this bilateral engagement between two of America's top trading allies who now face these tariff letters from Donald Trump?
Well, it's key. I mean, first of all, in Canada, it's referred to the Canada-US-Mexico Trade Agreement, and in the U.S., it's referred to as the U.S.-Canada-Mexico Trade Agreement. Mexico always comes a distant third, I suppose, even though it's one of America's most important trading partners after Canada. What's going on right now is Trump is profoundly confused about tariffs. Some days he sees them as a source of revenue. Some days he sees them as a means of onshoring or reshoring production from Canada and Mexico to the United States. And some days he sees them as just bargaining leverage. And I think that's the mode he's in at the moment with respect to Canada and Mexico. He's treating this increase in across-the-board tariffs, in Canada's case from 25% to 35%, as a means of getting the best possible deal, bilateral, trilateral deal possible. Now, the irony there, of course, is that he was the guy on the U.S. side who negotiated what he called the most beautiful trade deal ever, which was the Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade agreement. And it needs to be said that under the terms of that agreement, whatever noises President Trump has been making recently about 35%, about aluminium tariffs, about tariffs on automobile parts, the fact of the matter is, as of yesterday, 91% of Canadian exports to the U.S., as long as they're compliant with the Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade agreement, are tariff-free. So right now, and I think not a lot of people know that, right now the vast, vast majority of Canadian exports to the United States are tariff-free. That's largely true of Mexican exports to the U.S. as well. But there is a fear that Trump will override that, or when they enter the next round of that's meant to be renegotiated soon, that President Trump will adopt a different perspective. And in that context, it's important that Mexico and Canada are on the same page, that they present a united front. And I think that's the significance of the meeting the other day.
Well, Andrew, this actually leads in very well to my next question. As you said, Trump did negotiate this previous deal, but given the two countries, Canada and Mexico, kind of face an ultimatum in their own right, how might Canada's economic priorities align or clash with Mexico's at this time of global supply chain disruption?
Well, it depends on the sector. On the automobile sector, it's thoroughly integrated across North America, Mexico, the U.S., and Canada, and has been for a long time. Mexico has certain comparative advantages, relatively inexpensive labor, for example, but other advantages as well, and Canada does in the U.S. And this is a century-old arrangement that has been codified, as it were, in the Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade agreement and its predecessor, NAFTA. The disruption that would take place would cost American consumers, including Donald Trump's base, an average of something like $6,000 or $7,000 extra on the kind of pickup truck that's very popular in the United States. And that's bound to alienate further his base, which he's already alienated around the Epstein issue and things like that. He's not up for re-election, obviously. He's term limited. But the movement that he has birthed is fragmenting and fracturing around some of these issues. I'm not terribly concerned. I think there's sufficient interests in the United States that are in favor of the current arrangement, perhaps with some tweaks here and there, but it works right now. And the idea that firms located in Mexico and Canada could relocate to the United States in a month is absurd. They would have to build new facilities, which will take years, and as I said, it will increase the costs. So I think there are constituencies in Canada and the U.S. and Mexico that are in favor of a relatively harmless tariff regime. Now, there's domestic politics in all three countries as well. Prime Minister Carney in Canada has made a great deal about being a tough guy and pushing back on Donald Trump, although he seems to be, when push comes to shove, if not wavering, certainly willing to do a deal that is not terribly detrimental to Canada's interests, but is to some extent detrimental to Canada's interests. To a large extent, President Trump, of course, that's the largest economy in the world. He has a great deal of leverage. It remains to be seen how he will use that. My guess is that this is a lot of bluster, a lot of hype, a lot of havering. But at the end of the day, the Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade arrangement will remain fundamentally unchanged.
Andrew, you are staying with us to discuss more US policy. We move on now, where a new US intelligence assessment reveals that American airstrikes in June destroyed only one of 3 targeted Iranian facilities, as per reports from NBC News, citing current and former officials. The limited damage falls short of the strategic impact originally intended by the operation, which was designed to disrupt Iran's nuclear capabilities. According to the report, President Donald Trump rejected a military plan for broader, longer-lasting strikes that would have lasted several weeks. The decision to scale back reflected Trump's reluctance to escalate military action further, despite pressure from some within his administration to take on more forceful steps against Tehran. We're once again joined by Andrew Latham to discuss this further. Andrew, we've seen plenty of reports come out about these June strikes on the 3 nuclear bases in Iran. Fordo remains the base where there seems to be the most debate around. However, given the conflicting reports, the multiple reports from different organizations, and then Donald Trump's own assessment of those nuclear capabilities of being absolutely obliterated, how does one go about navigating which report to trust?
Well, there are conflicting reports because nobody has eyes on the ground, if that's a metaphor that works. Nobody has, not even the Israelis have a clear sense. And so we get these conflicting reports. I think the bottom line is this. Trump was caught between Scylla and Charybdis, a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, he's made a great deal about his opposition to what he calls forever wars, getting bogged down in another lengthy war like Afghanistan and Iraq, etc. And so for him, a limited and decisive strike was his preferred option. And so it was never going to be a multi-day or multi-week or multi-month campaign. It was going to be one and done. And then the question becomes what was accomplished. And in one sense, it was a success. It brought Iran to the negotiating table, and they did a ceasefire deal, not a peace deal, but a ceasefire deal with the Israelis. And I think that was partly because of the compellence factor of these strikes. So put that in the win column, as it were. It remains to be seen if that ceasefire holds, if it translates down the road into a peace agreement that's more permanent, etc. But for now, we have this imperfect ceasefire, and that's better than what was going on during the 12-day war. Okay. In terms of the nuclear program, that one and done philosophy was never going to work. The facilities that were struck are not the only facilities, first of all. Second, we don't know what was moved from those facilities in the run-up to the American strike. And finally, I have no doubt that serious damage and disruption was done, but was it decisive? Did it mark the end of the Iranian nuclear program and the ballistic missile program that's associated with it and the variety of things within the penumbra of the nuclear program? I think not. Now, that's my judgment looking at the various, sometimes conflicting, sometimes corresponding reports. Some damage was done. The program was set back. Was it obliterated, as Donald Trump claimed? No, it wasn't. It's going to require follow-up on the part of the Israelis, ground action and things like that to set it back further. And of course, that then is in tension with the ceasefire agreement, which is imperfect, but as I said, is better than open warfare. So it's a very confusing and complicated situation on the ground there. Long term, the Israelis and the United States have to find, in their own interests, a way of persuading the Iranians to drop this program. And that's going to be difficult because the Iranian other deterrent, its ring of fire, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, etc., has to a large extent been obliterated. That has been obliterated, not the Houthis, but Hamas and Hezbollah and some factions in Syria. That's been obliterated. So without that deterrent, Tehran only has one other option, a nuclear deterrent. And so that negotiation is going to be incredibly complicated because the national interests of Israel, the U.S., and Iran are simply contradictory.
Andrew Latham, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Pleasure to have you. We now stay in the Middle East, where a parish priest and several civilians were injured when the Holy Family Church, the only Catholic church in northern Gaza, was struck during an attack. The building sustained significant damage, reportedly from tank shelling. Among the wounded was Father Gabriel Romanelli, a well-known priest with close ties to the late Pope Francis. At the time of the strike, the church was providing shelter to both Christian and Muslim civilians, including several children with disabilities, according to reports. Multiple people remain in critical condition, including a disabled child, 2 women and an elderly person. Emergency responders continue to treat the injured as the broader humanitarian crisis in the region deepens. We're now joined by Martin Sá-Arraiz, who's a foreign affairs expert. He joins us live from Ecuador. Martin, thank you very much for joining us on the programme, as always. Martin, how do you assess the implications of this strike? According to some reports, 2 people killed in this church, the only Catholic church in the north of Gaza. What does this say about Israel's military strategy here?
Hamas, first of all, is very sad and unfortunate that this historic church has been destroyed. And of course, my heart with the victims. I think this will deteriorate the relationship between the Vatican and Israel, unfortunately. But we need to understand this was not a direct attack against the Catholic Church or civilian population. Unfortunately, Gaza is such a place that every single attack from Israel against Hamas will cause any harm to collateral people, collateral infrastructure that is not meant to be destroyed. I hope Israel can keep with its strategy to be more surgical. Israel has always tried to go to their goal, which is Hamas. And yeah, I think it's very sad that this historical site has been destroyed, but this is the reality. We also saw in Syria with the rebel war, a lot of historical sites were destroyed by the rebels, by other militias. This is part of the war. It's sad, but it's the reality.
Martin, so we've had a response from Giorgia Meloni, Italy's Prime Minister. She has condemned this attack. Is Israel further, once again, alienating itself from its allies, with especially now Israel and Italy still maintain a full diplomatic relationship? And actions like this, what are your thoughts on the impact of them on their Western allies?
I think this is a huge impact. Unfortunately, this will deteriorate a lot the relationship between Italy, the Vatican, and Israel. Even though the government of Meloni is a great supporter of the Netanyahu government, they share the same ideology. Like both are right-wing governments, but this is absolutely a milestone, a huge precedent for deteriorating the relationship between Israel and its allies. I hope Israel can maintain the diplomatic relationships despite the war. This war has been absolutely devastating for everyone. And in the case of Israel, it has been devastating in its political affairs. Israel has been losing a lot of support from the West because of this war. And I hope Israel will keep maintaining their operations without harming civilian infrastructure, which is very difficult, but they must take care of it.
Martin Sá-Arraiz, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. Pleasure having you. We now move over to Europe, where German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is visiting London for the first time since taking office to sign a comprehensive treaty with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. This follows a recent state visit by French President Emmanuel Macron, highlighting renewed cooperation among Europe's top powers amid growing security concerns and uncertainty about the US commitment to defend its European allies, including Ukraine. The treaty includes a significant mutual assistance clause reflecting the ongoing Russian aggression in Ukraine. It also builds on last year's defence deal involving joint development of long-range strike weapons and recent Franco-British nuclear cooperation. Germany and Britain also plan to boost joint arms exports, including the Typhoon Eurofighter and Boxer armoured vehicles, signalling a major shift after years of export restrictions. Additionally, the treaty will address migration by targeting smuggling networks, with Germany committing to outlaw facilitating illegal migration to Britain. Now let's take a look at some news from the sporting world. Cristiano Guarelli was the hero for Italy today, scoring twice, including a dramatic 90th minute winner to seal a 2-1 victory over Norway and send her team into the Euro 2025 semi-finals. Guarelli opened the scoring in the second half, but Norway hit back through captain Ada Hagerberg. Just when the match seemed headed for extra time, Guarelli stepped up again, firing Italy into their first Women's Euro semi-final since 1997. They'll now face either England or Sweden in the next round. World number one, Ariana Sabalenka, will skip the US Open warm-up tournament in Montreal due to fatigue, Tennis Canada announced on Wednesday. The 27-year-old from Belarus opted out of the July 26th to August 27th Canadian Open after reaching the semi-finals at Wimbledon and Berlin and falling in the French Open final. John Mateer is set to become Oklahoma's quarterback, reportedly securing around $3 million in name, image and likeness deals. His addition aims to help the Sooners rebound after a tough first season in the Southeastern Conference, finishing 6-7 overall and 2-6 in league play. Back in the summer of 2021, Mateer initially committed to the FCS program, Central Arkansas, and he said he wasn't as widely regarded as a major college quarterback. However, he decommitted 5 months and eventually signed with Washington State, opening the door to bigger opportunities. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.